I got the compressor relay back online around 6:30. Textile plant outside Roanoke. Third floor mechanical room that smelled like hot lint and old grease. The relay had burned out its coil. Probably been cycling dirty voltage for months before it gave up. I swapped it, checked the contactors, ran the unit through 3 cycles to make sure it held. The plant supervisor signed my sheet without looking at it. That was pretty standard. Nobody cares about HVAC until it stops working. I was loading tools back into the van when my phone buzzed. Stark Mechanical. I figured it was Lucas calling to tell me I could head home. Maybe grab something that wasn't vending machine food for once. It wasn't that. "Got a night call," Lucas said. No greeting. He sounded tired. "West Virginia, Green Bank." I leaned against the van door. How far? 3 hours, maybe 3.5. Observatory, federal site. They've got short cycling air handlers in a clean room. Something about sensitive equipment. Nobody else wants to drive out tonight. Of course they didn't. It was already getting dark, and Green Bank was the kind of place you couldn't find on most maps. Middle of nowhere. I'd heard of it once or twice. Some kind of radio telescope facility. The kind of place that made you turn your phone off because even a cell signal could mess with their readings. "What's the rate?" I asked. "Standard after hours plus mileage. Job tickets already in your queue." I pulled up the app on my phone. The ticket loaded slow, probably because I was still parked in the plant's loading zone where the signal barely reached. National Radio Astronomy Observatory. 2 air handler units, model numbers I recognized, short cycling every 8 to 12 minutes. Probable cause, bad pressure switch or fouled condenser coils. Estimated time 2 to 4 hours. It was doable. Long drive for a short fix, but that was the job sometimes. "Yeah, I'll take it," I said. "Good. Contact name's Rodney Fitzgerald, facilities lead. He'll meet you at the service gate. They're expecting you around 10. Lucas hung up before I could ask anything else. Also standard. I climbed into the van and punched the address into my GPS. 3 hours, 17 minutes. The route took me west on Route 64, then south through towns I'd never heard of. I stopped at a gas station just outside Covington, filled the tank, grabbed a coffee and a sandwich that tasted like plastic and mayonnaise. Ate it in the parking lot while the GPS recalculated. The drive got quieter the further I went. Fewer cars, fewer lights. The highway turned into a 2-lane state route that curved through dense woods and hills that pressed in close on both sides. My headlights caught reflective eyes a couple times. Deer, probably standing just off the shoulder. I kept it at 55 and didn't think too hard about what hitting one would do to the van. Around 9:40, I passed a sign that said Green Bank in faded white letters. Population 400-something. No streetlights. Just a handful of houses set back from the road. Windows dark or glowing dim yellow. The town felt shut down. Or maybe it always looked that way. Hard to tell. A mile past the town center, if you could call it that, another sign appeared. National Radio Astronomy Observatory. Authorized personnel only. The GPS told me to turn right. I did. The access road was narrow, paved, but rough, with trees crowding in so close their branches scraped the top of the van once or twice. It went on longer than I expected. No lights anywhere except my headlights cutting through the dark. I checked the GPS twice to make sure I hadn't missed a turn. Then the trees opened up. I came around a curve and saw it. A flat compound of low buildings spread out under a sky so black and clear I could actually see the Milky Way. I didn't stop to look at it for long. Just noted it and kept driving. There were a few small structures, sheds, maybe, or equipment housings, and further back, past a chain-link fence, I could see the white curve of something massive. The telescope, probably. I didn't know much about radio astronomy, but I knew the Green Bank telescope was supposed to be one of the biggest in the world. The service gate was right where the ticket said it would be. A simple drop-arm barrier with a small booth next to it, lit by a single overhead floodlight. I pulled up and rolled down my window. A man stepped out of the booth, mid-40s maybe, solid build, sandy brown hair cut short, pale gray eyes that didn't blink much. He wore a facilities jacket with an ID lanyard hanging around his neck and carried a clipboard. "Alexander Ross?" he asked. "That's me," I said. "Rodney Fitzgerald, facilities." He didn't offer his hand, just looked down at his clipboard, scanned it, then looked back at me. "You're here for the air handlers in Module C." "Yeah, short cycling units." He nodded once. "I'll need to see your work order and ID." I passed both through the window. He studied them under the floodlight, taking longer than I would have expected. My driver's license isn't that interesting. He finally handed them back, made a note on his clipboard, and stepped over to the booth. The barrier arm lifted. "Follow the access road to the second left," he said. "Park in the loading zone outside Module C. I'll meet you there." "Got it." I drove through. The road inside the compound was smoother, newer asphalt that didn't have cracks or patches. The buildings I passed were low and institutional, cinder block, narrow windows, metal doors with card readers mounted next to them. Everything looked closed down for the night. No lights in the windows, no cars in the small parking areas. Just empty. Module C was labeled in white block letters above a double door. I parked in the loading zone, which was just a painted curb next to a concrete pad, and killed the engine. Rodney pulled up 30 seconds later in a white utility truck. He got out, walked over to my van, and waited while I grabbed my tool bag and meter. "Quiet tonight," I said. "It's always quiet here." He said it flat, like it wasn't a joke or an observation, just a fact. He led me toward the building. His keycard beeped against the reader and the door clicked open. Inside was a hallway with tile floors and fluorescent lights that buzzed faintly. The air smelled like floor cleaner and something else, something dry and electrical. Rodney walked ahead without saying anything. His boots made steady, even sounds against the tile. We passed a break room, dark except for the glow of a vending machine, past a door labeled operations, another labeled storage. Everything had card readers. Everything looked locked. Rodney stopped at a junction where the hallway split into two directions. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a laminated card, about the size of an index card, and handed it to me. "Site compliance," he said. "You'll need to follow these while you're working." I took it. The lamination was thick, slightly yellowed at the edges, and the text inside was printed in a plain sans serif font. 5 lines, bold headers with short explanations underneath. I read it. 1. Airplane mode at all times. Keep your phone and any wireless devices in airplane mode or powered off. RF interference disrupts telescope operations and containment telemetry. 2. Respond to PA announcements immediately. If the PA system announces your name, stop work and exit the facility through the nearest external door. Do not return to the mechanical room or retrieve tools. 3. Do not open cabinets labeled calibration spares. These cabinets are locked for safety and inventory control. Facilities will provide any necessary parts or materials. 4. Avoid spectrum monitor in control room. B. If the wall clock in control room B reads 3:17, do not enter that room or approach the spectrum monitor. Wait in the corridor until the time changes. 5. Secure stairwell if snow is observed indoors. If you observe snow, frost, or ice forming inside any interior space, exit immediately and latch the basement stairwell door from the outside. Report to the service gate. I read it twice. The first 4 were weird but not impossible. Radio quiet sites had strict rules. I'd worked at a couple places that made you lock your phone in your car before you even walked in. The PA thing was odd, but maybe they had some kind of emergency protocol. The calibration cabinet rule just sounded like standard inventory control. The last one, though, snow indoors. I looked up at Rodney. Snow indoors? Old building, he said. HVAC faults sometimes cause condensation issues in the sublevels. It's a safety precaution. That didn't make sense. Condensation, sure. Maybe frost on a coil if something was leaking refrigerant. But snow forming indoors wasn't an HVAC fault. That was a structural failure, or a massive refrigeration leak, and either way you'd evacuate the whole building, not just latch a door. But Rodney was already moving again, pulling a key ring and a folded map from his jacket. "Mechanical rooms are on this level and one below," he said. He handed me the keys and the map. "You've got access to modules C and D. Air handler units are marked on the map. If you need parts, radio me." He tapped a small walkie-talkie clipped to his belt. "Channel 3. "Got it," I said. He looked at me for a moment. His pale gray eyes didn't blink. "Stay on task," he said. "Finish the work and log out at the gate before you leave. Don't explore. Don't open doors you don't need to open." "Sure." He nodded once, turned, and walked back down the hallway. His footsteps faded. Then the far door beeped and clicked shut, and I was alone. I stood there in the junction hallway, holding the laminated card, the keys, and the map. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. Somewhere deeper in the building, I could hear the faint hum of a compressor running. I checked my phone. Airplane mode, already on. I'd switched it over when I passed the town limit, just out of habit. Then I looked at the map. Module C, Mechanical Room 2. Second door on the left, down the east corridor. That was it. Just another night call. Just another job. I folded the card into my jacket pocket, shouldered my tool bag, and started walking. The south wing mechanical space was hotter than it should have been. Not overheated exactly, just warmer than the corridor, probably 80-something degrees, and the air smelled dry and dusty with that electrical ozone smell you get from motors running hard. The air handler sat against the far wall, a big boxy unit maybe 6 feet tall, painted institutional beige with a service panel on the front. I could hear the belt before I even got close. That high squealing whine that means the thing's slipping, probably glazed or cracked or just loose on the pulleys. I set my tool bag down and popped the access panel. The belt was bad. I could see it right away. Cracked along the inner edge, shiny and glazed on the contact surface, riding too high on the motor pulley. When I touched it with my finger, it had that hard, slick feeling instead of the grip it should have had. The motor was running, blower spinning, but the belt kept slipping every few seconds and making that awful noise. I killed the power at the local disconnect and waited for the blower to coast down. Took maybe 20 seconds. Then I loosened the motor mount bolts, 4 of them, half-inch heads, and slid the motor forward on its rails to get slack in the belt. The old belt came off easy. I dug through my bag for a replacement and found a B-section belt that looked close to the right length. Wasn't a perfect match, but it'd work. I looped it over the pulleys, checked the alignment by eye, then cranked the motor back until the belt had about half an inch of deflection when I pressed down on it. Tightened the mount bolts in a cross pattern so it wouldn't cock sideways. Flipped the disconnect back on and the motor spun up smooth. No squeal. Blower turning steady. I let it run for a minute and listened. Sounded fine. That part was easy. The short cycling was the real problem. I grabbed my meter and the folded map Fitzgerald had given me and checked the route to the electrical panel. It was marked on the map, 2 rooms over through a connecting door. I wheeled my cart that direction, past a row of gray metal shelving units stacked with filters still in plastic wrap and a couple of cardboard boxes labeled with part numbers I didn't recognize. The electrical room was smaller than I expected, maybe 10 by 12 feet, concrete floor, cinder block walls painted the same industrial off-white as everything else. The panel was mounted head high on the left wall, a square D load center, 200 amp main breaker, about 30 circuits below it. A handwritten label next to the panel said, Module C South, HVAC and MISC. The handwriting was neat, all caps, done in permanent marker that had faded to brown. I opened the panel cover and clipped my meter leads to the bus. Voltage looked fine. 240 volts across the legs, balanced. I traced the circuit for the air handler I'd just worked on and checked the contactor. It was a 30-amp definite purpose type, square D, same brand as the panel. When the thermostat called for cooling, the contactor should pull in clean and hold steady. But when I triggered a test cycle, I could hear it chattering. Not constantly. Just every few seconds, a quick metallic click, click, click like it was losing grip and catching again. I killed the breaker and pulled the contactor out of its mount. The coil looked fine, but the connection lugs were loose. Not finger loose, but loose enough that under load they'd heat up and expand, and the contactor would drop out for a split second before pulling back in. That had caused the short cycling. 8 to 12 minutes. Yeah, that tracked. The unit would start, run until the contactor chattered and dropped, then the safety timer would reset and it'd start again. I tightened the lugs with my nut driver, quarter turn on each one, then checked them again to make sure they were snug. Reinstalled the contactor, flipped the breaker back on, and ran another test cycle. This time it pulled in clean. Solid click, no chatter. Voltage stayed steady across the load terminals. I watched it for maybe 3 minutes, completely stable. I was checking the reading a fourth time when the PA speaker clicked. It was mounted in the corner of the room near the ceiling. A small rectangular grill, maybe 6 inches across, beige plastic. I'd noticed it when I came in, but it hadn't made a sound until now. Just a single click, like a relay closing. Then it said my name. Alexander Ross. That was it. No alarm tone. No attention or please report to or anything. Just my name, clear and flat, in a man's voice I didn't recognize. Not Fitzgerald's voice. Someone else. The speaker clicked again and went silent. I stood there with the meter still in my hand and my other hand on the panel door. My gut went cold in that specific way it does when something's wrong but you don't know what yet. The laminated card. Rule 2. If PA system announces your name, immediately stop work and exit through nearest external door without returning to mechanical room or retrieving tools. I'd read it twice in the hallway and thought it was weird but not impossible. Big federal site, lots of protocols. Maybe they had some safety thing about clearing areas during certain tests. But actually hearing my name come out of that speaker with no context, no instruction, nothing, that was different. I looked at the panel. Contactor was holding steady. Unit was running fine now. I could button it up in 2 minutes, pack my tools, write up the ticket, and be done. Probably nothing. Probably some automated check-in thing and I was supposed to radio back or walk to the booth or something. But the rule said exit immediately. I shut the panel cover, left my meter on top of my tool bag, left the bag sitting next to the panel with the nut drivers and spare contactors and wire still inside. Stepped out of the electrical room and pulled the door most of the way closed behind me. Fitzgerald had pointed out the exit route when we'd walked in. Back down the main corridor, past the junction, through the double doors at the end. I followed it. My boots sounded too loud on the tile. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead same as before, but now I noticed it more. The hallway smelled like floor cleaner and something else underneath it. Something I couldn't name. I hit the double doors and pushed through. Cold air hit me in the face. Had to be low 40s outside, maybe high 30s. I hadn't grabbed my jacket, left it in the van. The route downhill was obvious. A paved path, maybe 4 feet wide, leading away from Module C toward a cluster of smaller structures about 100 yards off. I could see them in the ambient light from the compound. A squat shed with a metal roof. A cylindrical diesel tank next to it. Maybe 10 feet tall and painted white with rust streaks down the sides. Generator shed, I figured. Every site this remote had backup power. I walked down the path. The pavement was rough under my boots, patched in a couple places with asphalt that didn't quite match. Trees pressed in on both sides, just dark shapes against the stars. No lights down here except what spilled from the main buildings behind me. The diesel tank sat on a concrete pad next to the shed. The shed itself was maybe 12 by 12, corrugated metal siding, no windows, one door with a heavy padlock. I could hear the low hum of something mechanical inside, probably the generator on standby, ticking over. I stopped next to the tank and waited. The rule didn't say how long, just said exit through the nearest external door. Didn't say come back, didn't say wait for instructions, but it also didn't say what I was supposed to do next, and standing outside a diesel tank at 40 degrees with no jacket didn't seem like a long-term plan. I waited anyway, watched the main buildings, watched the access road, watched for headlights or someone walking out or a radio call or anything. Nothing happened. The compound stayed quiet. A few lights on in the buildings, but no movement I could see. No vehicles. No Fitzgerald walking down to check on me. No PA announcement telling me to come back or report somewhere else. Just the hum from the generator shed and the wind moving through the trees and the cold working its way through my shirt. I checked my phone out of habit. Still in airplane mode. No signal anyway, probably. I didn't turn it off, airplane mode, to check. 5 minutes. Maybe closer to 10. Hard to say. I didn't wear a watch. The air handler was running steady when I left, but it hadn't been tested under a full load cycle yet. If it short-cycled again overnight and someone came in tomorrow morning to a warm, clean room, that was on me. Lucas would get the call. I'd get pulled off the rotation, maybe worse. Federal site, high-profile client. Stark Mechanical couldn't afford a bad report. I looked back up the path toward Module C. Lights still on inside. Door still closed. Nobody was coming. The rule said exit. It didn't say stay out. And if they wanted me gone, they could have sent Fitzgerald down here or called on the radio or done literally anything other than nothing. I walked back up the path. The weirdness sat in my chest the whole way. That feeling like I was making the wrong choice. But I was making it anyway because the job wasn't done and I didn't have enough information to do anything else. The door opened when I pushed it. The hallway looked exactly the same. Fluorescent lights, buzzing. Tile floor. Smell of cleaner and that dry, electrical smell. I kept walking. Back to the electrical room. Back to my tools. The panel was still closed. My meter was still sitting on my tool bag. Everything exactly where I'd left it. I picked up the meter and opened the panel again. The contactor was holding. Voltage steady. Unit running smooth. I got back to work. I went back to the air handler with the replacement contactor in hand. The old one had been chattering because the connection lugs were loose. Common enough problem, usually fixed with a quarter turn on each terminal. But this one had heated enough that the metal had expanded and contracted too many times. The lugs were scored where they'd arced. I could have tightened them and probably gotten another month out of it, but that wasn't the kind of repair you leave at a federal site in the middle of nowhere at 11:30 at night when you're 3 hours from home. I killed the breaker again, waited for the unit to go quiet, pulled the old contactor and set it on top of my tool bag. The replacement was a square D 2-pole, 30 amp, same coil voltage. I checked the mounting holes, lined up clean, then bolted it in and torqued each lug to spec. Not finger tight, not gorilla tight, just right. That's the part most people screw up. They think tighter is better and then wonder why the terminal cracks or the wire strands shear. I flipped the breaker back on and the contactor pulled in with a solid click. Clean. No chatter. I clipped my meter leads across the load terminals and watched the voltage hold steady at 238. The blower motor spun up smooth. I let it run through a full cycle. Compressor kicked on, held for 2 minutes, cycled off, held for 8. Then it kicked back on. Exactly how it should. No short cycling, no dropout. Just a normal, boring, functioning air handler doing its job. I stood there for another minute watching the numbers on my meter stay flat. Probably longer than I needed to. But I wanted to be sure. If this thing tripped again after I left, Lucas would get a call before sunrise and I'd be the guy who couldn't fix a contactor. That's how it works. Doesn't matter if the problem's somewhere else in the system. Doesn't matter if the client's lying about the symptoms. If you touch it and it breaks again, it's your fault. The unit kept running. I packed the old contactor into a plastic bag and shoved it in my tool bag. I'd log it later for the invoice, parts and labor, mileage, the usual. That's when I heard the tapping, soft, deliberate, coming from behind me. I turned around. The mechanical room was empty, just the air handler, my tool bag, a few shelves with filters and spare parts. The tapping came again. 3 quick taps, pause, 2 taps, pause, 3 taps. It was coming from the wall. No, from behind the door on the far side of the room. The one I'd walked past twice and hadn't really looked at. I stepped closer. The door was narrow, maybe 2.5 feet wide, painted the same industrial beige as everything else. There was a small rectangular label at eye level, laminated and screwed into the metal with 2 Phillips head screws. It said calibration spares in the same plain sans serif font as the compliance card Fitzgerald had given me. The tapping stopped. I waited. Counted to 10 in my head. It started again. 3 taps, pause, 2 taps, pause, 3 taps. Same pattern, exactly the same rhythm. I thought about the rule on the card. Do not open cabinets labeled calibration spares. Locked for safety and inventory control. Except this wasn't a cabinet. It was a door. And I hadn't tried the handle yet, so I didn't know if it was locked. The tapping repeated. 323, like it was waiting for me to answer. I didn't touch the door. I'm not an idiot. You don't open random doors at a federal research site in the middle of the night when you've already been told not to, and when the PA system's calling your name for no reason, and when the guy who let you in looks at you like you're a specimen he's cataloging. You especially don't open them when something on the other side is tapping in patterns. I picked up my tool bag. The tapping kept going. 323, 323. I walked out of the mechanical room and pulled the door shut behind me. The tapping cut off the second the latch clicked. I stood in the hallway with my tool bag in one hand and my meter in the other. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. The air smelled like floor cleaner and something dry. Maybe ozone. Maybe just old dust in the ductwork. I wanted to see a camera. A security camera in the corner with a little red light so I'd know someone was watching and logging all this. I wanted to see another person. A janitor. A night shift tech. Anyone. The hallway was empty. I checked my phone. Still in airplane mode. The time said 11:42. I'd been inside for just over an hour. The air handler was fixed. I could have packed up, walked back to the van, and driven home. But I kept thinking about the PA announcement, about the rule that said exit immediately, and how nobody had come to check on me, and how when I came back inside, everything was exactly where I'd left it, like the whole thing had been a test, or a mistake, or something else I didn't have a name for. I wanted to know if there were logs, if someone was tracking this, if Fitzgerald was sitting in that booth at the service gate watching camera feeds and making notes on his clipboard. The control rooms were marked on the map Fitzgerald had given me, 2 of them. Control Room A and Control Room B, both in Module C, 1 level down. I found the stairwell at the end of the hallway. Metal stairs, concrete walls, fluorescent lights in wire cages. My boots made flat echoing sounds on the treads. At the bottom, there was another hallway, narrower than the one upstairs, with the same tile floor and the same smell. Doors on both sides, all of them closed, all of them with card readers. I checked the map. Control Room B was the 3rd door on the right. The door was unlocked. I pushed it open and stepped inside. The room was dark, except for the glow from equipment racks along the left wall and a couple of standby monitors on the desks. Blue and green LEDs, the kind that stay lit even when everything's supposed to be off. It gave the room a dim, underwater look. I could make out desks, chairs, filing cabinets, a big monitor mounted on the far wall. The air was cooler than the hallway. Not cold, just noticeably cooler. Maybe 65. I looked for the wall clock. It was above the big monitor, round and plain with a white face and black numbers. The kind you see in every school and government building. It read 1:17. My watch said 11:44. I stood there for a second doing the math. An hour and 33 minutes off. That wasn't a time zone thing. That wasn't a battery thing. That was just wrong. I watched the second hand. It swept around the face normally for about 10 seconds. Then the minute hand jumped. Not a smooth sweep. It ticked forward from the 17 to the 18 and settled there with a tiny mechanical click, like it had skipped a beat and then caught up with itself. I checked my watch again. 11:45. The wall clock still said 1:18. The room was quiet except for a faint hum from the equipment racks. I took a step forward, then another. I wanted to see the monitors, see if they were showing anything useful. Camera feeds, system logs, anything that would tell me what this place actually did and why they needed air handlers that couldn't short cycle and why they had rules about indoor frost and PA announcements with no follow-up. One of the wheeled chairs moved, just a few inches. A slight roll to the left, like someone had bumped it. Except I was 10 feet away and I hadn't touched anything. I stopped walking. The chair stopped moving. I could see it clearly now in the glow from the monitors. Standard office chair, black fabric, 5 wheels, armrests. It was sitting in front of the middle desk, angled slightly toward me. I looked around the room. No vents blowing air, no fan running. Nothing that would push a chair on a tile floor. I kept moving, slower now, watching where I stepped. The tile was clean, no dust, no dirt, no scuff marks, just smooth gray tile with thin grout lines. Then I saw the water, a thin line of it, maybe an inch wide, running from somewhere behind the desk toward the big monitor on the wall. It looked fresh, not a puddle, not a spill, just a line, like something had melted and run across the floor in a straight path. I crouched down next to it. The tile was wet. I touched it with one finger and the water was cold. Really cold. Colder than tap water. Colder than it should have been in a room that was 65 degrees. I followed the line with my eyes. It led to the desk under the big monitor. There was a headset sitting there. The kind with a boom mic and padded ear cups, black plastic and foam. The cable was coiled next to it. I walked over, set my tool bag down, leaned in close. The headset had frost on it. Not condensation, not moisture. Frost. White and crystalline, clustered around the jack, where the cable plugged into the base and spreading up the cable itself in thin, feathery lines. I touched the metal jack with the back of my knuckle. It was cold enough to sting. I pulled my hand back. The room was 65 degrees. The equipment racks were running normal. The monitors were on standby. There was no reason for frost, no reason for ice, no reason for a headset sitting on a desk in a sealed building to be cold enough to freeze the moisture in the air. I thought about Rule 5. If snow, frost, or ice forms inside any interior space, exit immediately and latch basement stairwell door from outside. I was in a basement level. The stairwell door was 20 feet behind me. The wall clock ticked. 1:19. My watch said 11:47. I sat down at the console. The chair rolled back a couple inches when I settled my weight, and I had to pull myself forward using the desk edge. The headset was still there with the frost spreading along its cable, and the thin line of water ran past my boot toward the monitor. I figured I should probably sort out what was actually broken versus what was just normal, weird observatory stuff. Federal sites have all kinds of equipment I don't usually deal with. Maybe the frost was from some kind of calibration rig they ran earlier. Maybe the water line was condensation from a dehumidifier they forgot to empty. I kept my eyes on the desk surface. 2 keyboards sat side by side, both black with worn keycaps on the home row. A coffee mug with a faded logo I couldn't read in the blue LED light. A stack of printouts held down by a stapler. The printouts had columns of numbers and timestamps, probably telemetry logs or something. I didn't touch them. The headset cable ran to the edge of the desk and stopped. I leaned closer. The jack wasn't plugged into anything. It just hung there, dangling over the side with frost still creeping up from the metal tip. That bugged me a little. If the headset wasn't plugged in, what was causing the frost? Static charge doesn't do that. Condensation doesn't form that way either. You'd need active cooling or a refrigerant leak, and I didn't see any equipment under the desk that would explain it. I scanned the corners of the room. The compliance card said if snow, frost, or ice forms inside any interior space, exit immediately and latch the basement stairwell door from outside. But the rules specified snow, frost, or ice forming inside the space. The headset had frost on it, sure, but the rest of the room looked fine. No ice on the walls, no condensation on the monitor, no white patches spreading across the floor, just the headset, just the water line. I checked the ceiling corners where cold air would settle first if there was an HVAC fault. Nothing. The air felt cool but stable, maybe 65 degrees, and it wasn't dropping. My breath didn't fog. My hands weren't going numb. The desk layout was pretty standard. Monitor in the center, keyboards flanking it, mouse on the right, a small desk lamp that wasn't turned on, a pen cup with 3 pens and a flathead screwdriver. The filing cabinet behind me had a metal surface that would show condensation if the room was actually cold enough to frost. But when I glanced back, it looked dry. I was treating the whole laminated card thing like over-the-top policy. Federal sites do that. They write rules for the worst-case scenario and make you follow them even when it doesn't make sense. I figured the frost was probably residual from some test they'd run earlier, and the water was just runoff that hadn't dried yet. I started to stand. My hands pressed against the armrests, and I shifted my weight forward. The wall clock above the big monitor clicked. I glanced up without thinking. The minute hand jumped from 1:16 to 1:17. 3:17. My chest tightened. I sat back down hard and the chair rolled back a couple inches again. The compliance card rule hit me all at once. If wall clock in control room B reads 3:17, do not enter that room or approach the spectrum monitor, but wait in corridor until time changes. I was already in the room. I'd already approached the monitor. I was sitting right under it. The rule didn't say what to do if you were already inside when the clock hit 3:17. It just said, don't enter, don't approach. But I was here. The clock had changed while I was sitting here. I looked down at the desk fast, keeping my eyes off the monitor. My hands were still gripping the armrests. The headset cable hung in front of me with frost creeping further up toward the ear cups now, spreading faster than it had a minute ago. The rule didn't give instructions for what to do if you screwed up. It just said wait in the corridor. But I couldn't get to the corridor without standing, without turning around, without walking past the monitor. I reached for the headset cable. My fingers felt clumsy. The jack was already unplugged, just dangling there, but I grabbed it anyway and pulled it further away from the desk edge. Like unplugging it again would help. Like following part of the rule would count for something. It didn't make sense. You can't unplug something that's already disconnected, but my hand did it anyway, pulling the cable toward me and setting the jack down on the desk surface away from the frost. I kept my gaze down. The desk, the keyboards, the printouts, the coffee mug. I didn't look up. I didn't turn around. The monitor was right behind me, mounted on the wall above the desk, and I could feel it there even though I wasn't looking at it. The spectrum monitor. That's what the rule called it. Not just monitor. Spectrum monitor. I didn't know what that meant. I didn't want to know. A faint crackle came from somewhere behind my head. Soft, like distant static or interference. It didn't sound like it was coming from speakers. It sounded like it was coming from inside the casing, from the electronics themselves, like a bad capacitor or arcing contact. I kept my eyes on the console edge. My tool bag was on the floor to my left. My meter was on the desk. I could see both without looking up at the monitor, just there in my peripheral vision, solid and real. The crackling got a little louder. Still faint, still coming from inside the monitor casing, but steady now, not rhythmic. Just constant low interference. The kind you get when shielding breaks down or a ground connection goes bad. I stayed oriented toward the console edge. If I kept my head angled down and forward, I could avoid seeing the screen entirely. The blue and green LEDs from the equipment racks gave me enough light to see the desk, and that was all I needed to see. My phone was in my pocket, still in airplane mode. I thought about pulling it out to check the time, but my hands stayed on the armrests. My watch would have told me, except I'd left it in the van. The crackling shifted pitch. Just slightly. Like the frequency had drifted half a step lower. I counted to 10 in my head, then 20. The clock was still 3:17. I didn't look up to check, but I would have heard it click if the minute hand moved. The PA speaker clicked, that same relay sound from before. Sharp and metallic. A man's voice came through, not the one from earlier. This one sounded older, rougher. It said, "Rodney Fitzgerald." The speaker clicked again. Silence for maybe 5 seconds, then the click came back, and the voice repeated, "Rodney Fitzgerald." Same tone, same pacing, exactly the same. Another pause, another click. "Rodney Fitzgerald." It kept going, the same name, over and over, each time preceded by that relay click. But the sound was shifting, not the voice itself, the location, like the speaker wasn't just in the corner of the room anymore, like it was getting closer. Rodney Fitzgerald. Closer. Rodney Fitzgerald. I gripped the armrests harder. The voice wasn't moving through the room. That didn't make sense. The PA system was fixed. The speaker was mounted in the corner, but the sound kept shifting anyway, coming from somewhere to my right now instead of above me. Rodney Fitzgerald, right behind my shoulder. I rose slowly. My legs felt stiff. The chair rolled back as I stood, and I had to steady myself against the desk. I kept my head down, eyes on the tile floor, on my boots, on the thin line of water that had spread a little wider now. Something touched my shoulder. A hand. I recoiled hard, twisting away and stumbling back into the chair. It rolled and hit the desk behind me. My tool bag tipped over and tools spilled across the tile with a metal clatter that echoed way too loud in the small room. I looked up. No one was there. I spun around and Rodney Fitzgerald was standing in the doorway. Same facilities jacket. Same ID lanyard. Same pale gray eyes that didn't blink much. He looked exactly like he had at the service gate. Solid build, sandy brown hair, everything on duty and professional. He stood there with his hands at his sides, not moving, not reacting to the tools scattered across the floor or the chair I'd knocked into the desk. "Sight flagged an unauthorized person in Control Room B," he said. His voice was low and matter-of-fact. Same tone he'd used when he handed me the keys. "You need to leave immediately." I didn't say anything. My heart was still hammering from the hand on my shoulder, and I was trying to process the fact that no one had been there a second ago. Now Rodney was here, just standing in the doorway. He stepped into the room. "Now, please." I nodded. Couldn't really argue with that. I wasn't supposed to be down here anyway. I'd finished the air handler repair upstairs and had come down on my own. I bent down and started grabbing tools off the floor. Screwdriver, nut driver, the old contactor in its plastic bag. "Leave them," Rodney said. I looked up at him. "I need my tools. You can retrieve them from the service gate." He moved closer, reaching for my arm. "Right now we need to clear the space." His hand closed around my upper arm and I stood up automatically. His grip was firm, professional. The kind of grip a site supervisor uses when he's escorting someone out and doesn't want an argument. But it was cold. Not regular cold. Not like he'd been standing outside for 10 minutes. Cold like metal left in a freezer. Cold that went straight through my jacket sleeve and into the muscle underneath. I pulled back a little, but he didn't let go. He steered me toward the door, his hand still locked on my arm, and I let him because I didn't know what else to do. My tool bag was still on the floor. My meter was somewhere in the mess. But Rodney was already moving me into the hallway, and I figured I could come back for them once he'd logged whatever incident report he needed to file. We stepped into the hallway. Fluorescent lights, tile floor, same smell of cleaner and dry electrical dust. Rodney pulled the door shut behind us with his free hand, then turned me to the left, walking me down the hall away from the stairwell I'd come down. That's when the tapping started. 3 quick taps, pause, 2 taps, pause, 3 taps. Same pattern I'd heard upstairs in the mechanical room, but this time it wasn't just coming from one door. It came from the left, then the right, then further down the hallway, past the next junction. 323, 323. Like someone was moving from door to door, knocking the same rhythm, or like multiple people were answering at once. Rodney kept walking. His grip on my arm didn't change. He didn't react to the tapping at all. "You hear that?" I said. "Pressurization cycling," he said. Calm, flat. Happens when someone opens an exterior door. That wasn't pressurization cycling. I'd worked enough clean rooms to know what pressure differentials sounded like when they equalized. This was deliberate, rhythmic. It followed us as we walked. We passed a door on the right, and the tapping came from directly behind it. 323. We passed another, and it started there too, overlapping with the first. The hallway was filling with the sound. Dozens of doors, all tapping the same pattern, all perfectly synchronized. Rodney didn't slow down. I caught our reflection in a glass panel mounted on the wall. Some kind of safety notice behind the glass, but I wasn't reading it. I was looking at my shoulder, the one Rodney wasn't gripping. There was white dusting on the fabric, fresh, crystalline. It caught the fluorescent light and sparkled a little the way snow does when it's new and hasn't been stepped on yet. Snow. I stopped walking and Rodney's grip tightened, pulling me forward. I twisted to look at my shoulder directly. The dusting was there, definitely there. Small, delicate crystals melting slowly into the weave of my jacket. There was no snow outside. It was low 40s, maybe high 30s, dry, clear sky, and we were inside. "Keep moving," Rodney said. "There's snow on my shoulder," I said. "Condensation from the HVAC differential." He steered me around a corner, still pulling. "We need to secure the basement stairwell." I looked up at the ceiling. No vents directly above us. No condensation forming anywhere else. Just the white crystals on my shoulder, melting slowly, leaving a damp patch behind. The compliance card rule: if snow, frost, or ice forms inside any interior space, exit immediately and latch basement stairwell door from outside. Rodney was taking me toward a stairwell, not the one I'd come down. A different one, narrower, with a metal door propped open by a rubber wedge. The door had a heavy latch on the outside, the kind you flip down to secure it, industrial and manual, no card reader. He pulled me through the doorway and onto the landing. The air temperature dropped immediately. Not gradually, just dropped, like stepping into a walk-in cooler. I could see my breath. Rodney let go of my arm and gestured down the stairs. They descended into darkness. The lights down there were off or burned out. I couldn't tell which. Just concrete steps disappearing into black. "Go ahead," he said. I didn't move. "Where does this go?" "Sub-level mechanical." He pointed at the latch on the door. "You need to close this door and latch it from the outside." I stared at him, then at the latch, then back at him. "That would trap whatever's down there," I said. "It's procedure." His voice was still calm, still matter-of-fact. Site compliance requires it when interior frost is detected. I thought about that. Thought about the rule on the card. Exit immediately and latch basement stairwell door from outside. It said, latch it from outside, meaning stand in the hallway and secure the door so nothing from the basement could come up. But Rodney had walked me through the door, onto the landing. He wanted me to go down the stairs and then come back up and latch it. That didn't make sense. That would trap me inside with whatever was down there. "I'm not going down there," I said. Rodney turned to look at me. His face was the same. Sandy brown hair, pale gray eyes, broad nose, slightly puffy cheeks. Everything exactly the same as it had been at the service gate. Except it wasn't. Something was off. The features were right, but they didn't fit together the way they should. Like someone had drawn a face from memory and gotten all the parts correct, but put them in slightly the wrong places. The eyes were too far apart. Or maybe too close. The nose sat a fraction of an inch too high. The mouth didn't line up with the jaw. I took a step back. The skin moved. Not the muscles underneath. The skin itself. It shifted across the bones like it was loose, like it was a mask that didn't quite fit, sliding a millimeter to the left and then settling back into place. "Go down the stairs," Rodney said. Same voice, same tone. But his mouth didn't move quite right when he spoke. I shoved past him, didn't think about it, just moved, using my shoulder to knock him off balance, and bolted back through the doorway into the hallway. The PA speaker clicked. "Benjamin Carver," a man's voice said. Not the voice from before. A different one, older, hoarse. Click. "Marion Hess." Click. "David Sung." I ran. The hallway stretched ahead of me, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, tile floor solid under my boots. Behind me, I heard footsteps. Steady, even, not hurrying. Click. Patricia Wolf. Click. Alexander Ross. I hit the far stairwell at a full sprint, grabbed the railing, and hauled myself up the steps 2 at a time. My lungs burned. The air was still cold, my breath fogging in front of me, and the PA kept cycling through names I'd never heard, voices I didn't recognize until it came back around. Click. Alexander Ross. I kept climbing. I hit the double doors at full sprint and shoved through into the cold air outside. My lungs burned. I could still see my breath fogging in front of me, even though I'd left the stairwell behind. The compound spread out ahead, dark buildings, empty parking lots. That massive white curve of the telescope dish rising against the black sky. I didn't stop running. The compliance card had one rule that still made sense. If snow, frost, or ice forms inside any interior space, exit immediately and latch basement stairwell door from outside. I'd already failed the first part by going back in after the PA announcement. I'd failed again by not leaving control room B when the clock hit 3:17. But I'd gotten out. That had to count for something. I followed the same path downhill I'd taken before. 4 feet wide, paved, leading toward the cluster of smaller structures. The generator shed with its corrugated metal siding. The 10-foot cylindrical diesel tank with rust streaks. I'd waited there earlier for 5 to 10 minutes and nobody had come. That felt like the safest spot in the whole compound. Away from the buildings, away from the doors, away from whatever Rodney Fitzgerald had become. The shed's mechanical hum grew louder as I got closer. Generator on standby, same as before. I slowed to a jog, then stopped next to the tank on its concrete pad, bent forward with my hands on my knees trying to catch my breath. The air was cold, probably high 30s by now, maybe lower. I should have grabbed my jacket from the van, but I wasn't going back for it. The harsh security light mounted on a pole 20 feet away cast everything in that flat sodium vapor orange. My shadow stretched long across the pavement. I straightened up and turned to look back at Module C. The building sat there like before, low, institutional cinder block, windows dark, no movement. That's when I saw him, a man in uniform standing between me and the access road, blocking the quickest route back to the service gate, back to my van. He was tall, 6'2" maybe, broad-shouldered, wearing a sheriff's deputy uniform with duty belt and a heavy cold-weather coat. Dark blonde hair under a patrol cap. Square jaw. He stood with his feet planted, hands resting on his belt, watching me. I didn't move. He did. Took 3 steps forward, closing the distance by half. His boots made solid, deliberate sounds on the pavement. Alexander Ross? His voice was flat, controlled. The kind of tone cops use when they've already decided you're guilty of something. I nodded. Didn't trust my voice yet. My chest was still heaving. I'm Deputy Guerrero, Everett Guerrero. Received a call about 20 minutes ago reporting a trespasser on federal property. He stopped walking but kept his eyes on me. You're going to need to come inside and explain your presence here. I straightened up fully. I'm not trespassing. I'm a contractor. HVAC repair. Stark Mechanical out of Roanoke. I've got a work order. Then you'll be able to show me that inside. Guerrero gestured back toward Module C with one hand. Let's go. No. His expression didn't change. That wasn't a request. I'm not going back in there. My voice came out steadier than I expected. I was sent here to fix air handlers. I fixed them. Now I'm leaving. Guerrero took another step forward. You're on federal property without authorization. The facility supervisor called in a trespassing report. Until we get this sorted out, you're not going anywhere. I watched him. He stood there under the security light, backlit by that orange sodium glow. His breath should have been fogging. Mine still was. I could see it puffing out in front of me every time I exhaled. The temperature had to be in the 30s, maybe lower. Cold enough that every breath condensed into visible vapor. Guerrero's breath didn't fog at all. I stared at his mouth, his nose, waiting to see that telltale white mist. Nothing. He spoke again and I watched his lips move, watched the air in front of his face stay perfectly clear. You need to come with me now. Guerrero's hand moved to his belt, not to his weapon, to his radio. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. Behind me, something changed. A low mechanical whine started up from the direction of the telescope. Not the generator hum I'd been hearing. This was higher pitched. Hydraulic motors under load. I turned and looked at the dish. It was moving. The massive white curve was tilting upward, angling toward the sky. Slow, but steady. The motors whined louder as the structure shifted. Tons of metal and mesh pivoting on its mount. I could see the support framework underneath, the drive housing where the hydraulics connected, all of it rotating smoothly. There shouldn't have been any movement, not at midnight, not without a scheduled observation run. The dish kept tilting. 45 degrees now. 50. Angling up like it was tracking something overhead. Guerrero stood perfectly still. He didn't turn to look at the dish, didn't react to the sound, just kept his eyes on me. The PA speaker mounted on the nearest building clicked. That same relay sound. A woman's voice I hadn't heard before said, Jennifer Cole. Click. Thomas Brennan. Click. Alexander Ross. The tapping started again. Faint at first, coming from inside the generator shed. 3 quick taps, pause, 2 taps, pause, 3 taps. Then it came from the diesel tank beside me, then from the building behind Guerrero. Then from everywhere, overlapping, dozens of sources all tapping the same 3-2-3 pattern in perfect synchronization. The dish was at 60 degrees and still climbing. I thought about the compliance card, about Control Room B and the frost spreading on the headset cable, about Rodney Fitzgerald's face sliding wrong across his bones, about all those names the PA kept cycling through, one after another, like a roster of people who'd been here before me. I thought about Lucas and Stark Mechanical and the federal contract we couldn't afford to lose. Then I stopped thinking about any of that. I ran, not toward the access road, not toward Guerrero, toward the telescope. There was a maintenance cabinet bolted to the concrete pad near the generator shed. Gray metal, about 3 feet tall, secured with a simple sliding latch. I'd seen it earlier when I'd been waiting but hadn't paid attention. I grabbed the latch and yanked it open. Inside were tools, cables, a fire extinguisher, and, mounted in clips on the inside of the door, a heavy steel crank, T-shaped, about 18 inches long with a square drive socket on one end. Emergency manual override for the dish positioning system. I pulled it free and ran toward the telescope mount. Behind me, Guerrero's voice called out, "Stop right there. Do not approach the instrument." I didn't stop. The dish was at 70 degrees. The motors were screaming now, pushing hard, tilting the whole structure toward vertical. I could see the drive housing mounted at the base where the hydraulic rams connected to the elevation axis. There was a service ladder welded to the support framework. I grabbed the first rung and started climbing. My boots rang against metal. The ladder was cold enough that I could feel it through my gloves. I climbed fast, hand over hand, not looking down. The drive housing was maybe 12 feet up. The ladder ended at a platform just below it. I hauled myself onto the platform and found the manual override port. A square socket 2 inches across, recessed into the housing next to the hydraulic lines. There was a yellow and black striped plate bolted above it that read, "Manual override, emergency use only." The dish was at 80 degrees. I jammed the crank into the socket and turned it counterclockwise. Hard. Nothing happened. The hydraulics were still powered, still pushing the dish upward. The crank didn't want to move. I put my full weight on it, leaning into the handle, and felt something give. A mechanical clutch disengaging. The crank turned 6 inches and caught. The dish stopped climbing. The motors changed pitch, whining higher as they fought against the manual system. I kept cranking. Every rotation brought the dish back down maybe half a degree. The hydraulics were fighting me, trying to push it back up. My shoulders burned, my arms shook. The crank handle was freezing cold, and the metal bit into my palms, even through the gloves. I cranked it around once, twice, 3 times. The dish lowered another degree. The tapping got louder, faster. The 3-2-3 pattern overlapped until it sounded like rain hammering on metal. I cranked harder. The PA cycled through more names. David Sung, Patricia Wolf, Alexander Ross, Jennifer Cole. Over and over. My name kept coming up every 4th or 5th cycle. The dish was back to 70 degrees, then 65. The motors screamed, but I kept cranking. My right shoulder felt like someone was driving a spike through it. Something in my left forearm pulled and went hot. I didn't stop. 60 degrees, 55. The tapping changed rhythm, no longer synchronized. It sounded frantic now, chaotic, coming from every direction at once. 50 degrees. I gritted my teeth and threw everything I had into it. The crank turned. The dish lowered. 40 degrees. 30. My vision started to blur at the edges. I blinked hard and kept going. 20 degrees. 15. The rim of the dish was angling toward the ground now, tilting down past horizontal. This wasn't a normal operating position. This was emergency shutdown. This was forcing the whole structure into a position it was never designed to hold. I cranked it down to 10 degrees. 5. The edge of the dish touched the ground. The motors cut out instantly. The whining stopped. The tapping stopped. The PA speaker clicked once and went silent. Everything went quiet. I let go of the crank and sagged against the platform railing. My arms felt like they were on fire. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely grip the metal. I stood there breathing hard, watching the dish sit motionless with its rim pressed into the dirt. Below me, something hit the pavement. I looked down. Guerrero was lying on the ground next to the generator shed, face down, not moving. He'd taken one step forward. I could see his right boot was ahead of his left, and then just collapsed. I climbed down the ladder. My hands kept slipping on the rungs. By the time I reached the bottom, my legs were shaking too. Guerrero hadn't moved. I walked over slowly, and stopped a few feet away. He was completely still. No breathing, no twitching. Just lying there like someone had cut his power. I didn't get any closer. The sky was starting to lighten. Not much. Just that first faint gray that shows up maybe an hour before sunrise. I could make out more detail in the compound now. The buildings looked ordinary, institutional and boring, same as any federal facility. The dish sat tilted at that wrong angle, with its rim dug into the ground. I walked back to the diesel tank and sat down on the concrete pad with my back against the cold metal. My shoulders throbbed. My forearm was swelling. I was pretty sure I'd torn something. I waited. The sky went from black to dark gray to lighter gray. Birds started making noise somewhere in the trees past the fence line. The temperature didn't seem to be warming up any, but at least I could see better. At maybe 6:15, hard to tell exactly, still didn't have my watch, I heard an engine, a vehicle coming up the access road from the service gate. A black SUV rolled into view and parked near Module C. 2 people got out. A man in a dark windbreaker and jeans, and a woman in a black security jacket with a badge clipped to her belt. The woman walked toward me. The man stayed by the SUV. She was maybe 5'6", fit build, black hair pulled back tight in a bun. Sharp features. She carried a tablet in one hand. When she got close enough, I could read the badge. Site security. Alexander Ross. Her voice was crisp, professional. Yeah, I'm Teresa Graham, site security lead. She stopped about 10 feet away and looked at Guerrero's body, then at the dish, then back at me. You're going to need to walk me through what happened tonight. I stood up. My legs were stiff. You want the short version or the long version? All of it. So I told her. Everything. Starting with Lucas's call at the textile plant and ending with cranking the dish into the ground. I told her about Rodney Fitzgerald at the service gate, the compliance card, the PA announcement, the frost on the headset, the wall clock hitting 3:17, the hand on my shoulder, Fitzgerald's face moving wrong, the snow on my jacket, the basement stairwell, Guerrero's breath not fogging, the dish tilting up on its own. Teresa listened without interrupting. She made notes on her tablet. When I finished, she was quiet for maybe 10 seconds. Rodney Fitzgerald, she said finally. Describe him. I did. Mid-40s, solid build, sandy brown hair, pale gray eyes, facilities jacket, ID lanyard. Teresa tapped her tablet a few times, then turned it around to show me the screen. This him? It was a personnel photo. Same man, same face, same jacket. The photo showed him from the chest up with a neutral expression and a lanyard around his neck. The text below read, Rodney James Fitzgerald, Facilities Lead, hired March 2009. Yeah, that's him. Teresa turned the tablet back. Rodney Fitzgerald died 2 years ago. Aneurysm. He was in his office in Module D when it happened. I didn't say anything. You prevented a lock-on event. Teresa's tone didn't change. Still crisp, still professional. The dish was tracking something it shouldn't have been tracking. If it had reached 90 degrees, the feedback loop would have stabilized and we wouldn't have been able to interrupt it manually. What was it tracking? That's not your concern. She tapped the tablet again. But you also committed a serious protocol breach. The manual override system is for structural emergencies only. Earthquake, fire, catastrophic mechanical failure. You damaged the elevation drive and bent the rim support. It was moving on its own. I understand that. I'm telling you how this will be documented. Teresa held out her hand. I need your access card. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the key card Fitzgerald, or whatever had been wearing his face, had given me. Teresa took it and slipped it into her jacket. You're barred from returning to this site. Any future work orders for this facility will be assigned to other contractors. Stark Mechanical will receive formal notification by end of business today. She glanced at Guerrero's body again. You're free to leave. Take Route 28 north to Route 64. Don't stop in Greenbank. What about him? I nodded toward Guerrero. We'll handle it. And my tools. They're still in control room B. Teresa made another note on her tablet. We'll courier them to your company address within 72 hours. That was it. No thank you. No acknowledgement that I'd maybe stop something worse from happening. Just protocol and documentation and get off federal property. I walked back to the van. The man in the windbreaker, Mark Francis, according to the ID I could see now, watched me go but didn't say anything. My tool bag was gone. My meter was gone. My jacket was still in the van where I'd left it. I climbed into the driver's seat and my shoulders screamed. The left one especially. I could barely lift my arm high enough to grip the steering wheel. I started the engine and turned the van around. Drove back up the access road toward the service gate. The barrier arm was already raised. Nobody was in the booth. I drove through and turned left onto the main road. In the rearview mirror, I could see the compound. The telescope dish was still tilted down with its rim in the dirt. It looked wrong, broken. But they'd treat it like something that could be fixed, like something that could happen again. My phone buzzed. I'd turned airplane mode off without thinking about it. 3 missed calls from Lucas. 1 voicemail. I didn't listen to it. I knew what it would say. The road stretched ahead through the trees. The sun was coming up behind me, throwing long shadows across the pavement. My hands were shaking on the wheel. My shoulders throbbed with every small movement. I had no guarantee Stark would pay me for the job. No guarantee I'd still have a job at all once Lucas heard the full story from Teresa Graham's formal notification. I kept driving. The dish got smaller in the mirror until the trees swallowed it completely. That was it.